Dawn was breaking over the misty pines of Pinewood Wildlife Sanctuary, painting the Oregon Cascade foothills in hues of amber and gold. The tranquil scene belied the tension building within the sanctuary's rehabilitation complex, where Willow, a rescued bobcat with striking golden eyes and battle-scarred ears, was bringing new life into the world against overwhelming odds. The birthing process had begun hours earlier, each contraction bringing forth another tiny miracle. Cubs that by all scientific understanding should never have existed. 4 healthy bobcat cubs had already arrived, their wet fur glistening in the soft light of the birthing den. But it was the 5th cub that would defy explanation and leave Dr. Michael Reynolds, the sanctuary's veteran veterinarian, calling out in utter disbelief. What emerged in that final moment wasn't simply another cub. It was a revelation that would challenge everything we understand about wildlife biology and shake the scientific community to its core. If you're fascinated by nature's most extraordinary mysteries, hit the subscribe button now and turn on notifications to never miss another incredible wildlife story that changes how we see the natural world. The 175-acre Pinewood Wildlife Sanctuary sits nestled between old-growth forest and meandering mountain streams, a haven created 15 years ago by former National Park Ranger Tom Wilson after a devastating wildfire left the area in need of regeneration. Unlike conventional rehabilitation centers with their clinical atmosphere and metal enclosures, Pinewood was designed to mirror the natural world in every detail. Expansive habitats blend seamlessly with the surrounding forest. Underground observation tunnels allow staff to monitor animals without human detection. State-of-the-art medical facilities are camouflaged within rustic wooden structures that complement rather than intrude upon the landscape. We don't rehabilitate wildlife by changing them to suit our environment, Tom often tells visitors and new staff members. We create environments that honor their wildness while they heal. This philosophy has made Pinewood one of the most successful predator rehabilitation facilities in the Pacific Northwest, with release rates consistently exceeding national averages. The sanctuary specializes in apex predators, bears, mountain lions, wolves, and bobcats, animals that are often misunderstood and frequently come into conflict with expanding human populations. Each success story represents not just an individual animal saved, but a small victory for species survival in an increasingly fragmented wilderness. The Pinewood team represents diverse backgrounds united by uncommon dedication to wildlife conservation. Dr. Michael Reynolds, 54, heads the veterinary program after a distinguished 20-year career with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. His weathered face and salt and pepper beard carry the lines of someone who has witnessed both the harshest realities of wildlife conservation and its most triumphant moments. Known for his encyclopedic knowledge of predator medicine and unflappable demeanor during emergencies, Michael's colleagues often joke that his pulse rate never exceeds 60, even during the most stressful procedures. Working closely with Michael is Sarah Jenkins, a 32-year-old wildlife biologist whose groundbreaking research on bobcat territoriality has been published in leading scientific journals. With her distinctive red hair often pulled back in a practical braid and perpetually mud-splattered field boots, Sarah's appearance belies her meticulous approach to data collection and analysis. Tom Wilson, at 45, brings the practical knowledge of land management and conservation policy to his role as sanctuary manager. His background in wildfire ecology gives him unique insight into habitat restoration, and his relationships with government agencies and private landowners have been crucial to the sanctuary's expansion. Rounding out the core team is Amber Carter, 27, who coordinates the volunteer program and leads educational outreach. A former high school science teacher, Amber's talent for translating complex biological concepts into accessible lessons has transformed the sanctuary's community impact. Together, this team has created not just a rehabilitation facility, but a model for how humans can support wildlife recovery with minimal intervention and maximum respect for natural processes. The chain of events that would lead to Willow's extraordinary birth began on a stormy October night when state police responded to reports of illegal wildlife trafficking at a remote property in eastern Oregon. Among animals confiscated from deplorable conditions, malnourished wolves, sedated mountain lions intended for clandestine exotic pet sales, and several species never meant to exist on American soil, officers discovered a female bobcat confined to a cage barely larger than a household dog crate. Later estimated to be approximately 4 years old, the bobcat was severely underweight, her once magnificent coat dull and patchy from nutritional deficiencies and stress-induced overgrooming. Most concerning to the officers was her apparent docility, unusual in a wild bobcat and suggestive of either illness or prolonged captivity. "She's barely responsive," the officer noted in his report, either heavily sedated or shutting down completely. When Pinewood received the emergency call around midnight, Dr. Reynolds immediately prepared the isolation unit while Sarah gathered the specialized transport equipment. "Prepare for the worst," Michael cautioned his team as they loaded the sanctuary's response vehicle. Animals from these trafficking situations typically have multiple health issues, often compounded by improper care and unsuitable diets. The team arrived at the seizure location shortly before dawn, joining a chaotic scene of law enforcement, animal control officers, and makeshift triage stations for the most critical cases. When they finally reached the bobcat, Sarah's sharp intake of breath told Michael everything he needed to know. "She's pregnant," Sarah whispered, pointing to the subtle rounding of the animal's abdomen, barely perceptible beneath her emaciated frame. And from the looks of it, relatively far along. This complicated an already desperate situation. Bobcats typically give birth in spring after breeding in February, making an October pregnancy highly unusual, likely the result of hormone manipulation by the traffickers to produce valuable cubs for the illegal exotic pet trade. "We need to move quickly, but with extreme caution," Michael decided. The stress of transport could trigger premature labor, and she's in no condition to handle that. With practiced efficiency, the team sedated the bobcat just enough to transfer her safely to the transport carrier, monitoring her vital signs continuously during the tense 2-hour journey back to Pinewood. The bobcat, whom Amber named Willow for her surprising resilience despite her fragile appearance, was immediately settled into the sanctuary's specialized birthing den upon arrival. The space was designed to mimic a natural bobcat birthing location, a sheltered cave-like structure with multiple chambers, soft natural substrate for bedding, and absolute privacy from human disturbance except through camouflaged monitoring systems. Initial medical assessment revealed concerning findings. Beyond her obvious malnutrition, Willow showed signs of metabolic bone disease from calcium deficiency, parasitic infection, and dental issues consistent with trying to chew through metal caging. Most alarming to Dr. Reynolds was her pregnancy status. Ultrasound examination confirmed at least 4 developing cubs, but their position and Willow's stress level made precise imaging difficult. Based on fetal development, she's probably 45-50 days into gestation, Michael explained to the team during their emergency case conference. Bobcat gestation is typically 60-70 days. The fact that she's pregnant at all in these conditions defies explanation. The timing presented an impossible dilemma. Terminating the pregnancy would give Willow her best chance at recovery, but at nearly 50 days, the cubs were potentially viable. Allowing the pregnancy to continue risked Willow's already compromised health and would result in cubs born significantly out of natural season. "I don't like either option," Sarah admitted, reviewing Willow's blood work results. "But I think we have to give her the chance." Something about her, I can't explain it scientifically, but something tells me she's stronger than she looks. After intense deliberation, the team decided to support the pregnancy while addressing Willow's health issues through carefully calculated nutritional supplementation, minimal stress monitoring, and creating an environment where she could finally express natural behaviors after years of confinement. What no one realized then was that this decision would lead to one of the most extraordinary wildlife events ever documented at Pinewood, or perhaps anywhere in modern conservation history. For 2 weeks, Willow's progress exceeded even the most optimistic projections. Her coat began regaining its luster. Her weight increased steadily without compromising the pregnancy. Most surprisingly, she demonstrated remarkable adaptability to her new environment, utilizing the climbing structures and enrichment objects with increasing confidence. The team maintained their policy of minimal disturbance, monitoring primarily through hidden cameras and restricting direct observation to brief necessary medical checks. "She's reclaiming her wildness," Tom observed one evening, watching the live feed as Willow methodically scent-marked her territory within the spacious birthing complex. "I've never seen such rapid behavioral recovery in a trafficking case." Then, preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Exactly 17 days after her arrival at Pinewood, Willow's behavior shifted dramatically. The morning feeding remained untouched. Camera feeds showed her pacing, then digging intensively at the bedding material in the innermost chamber of the den complex. "She's nesting," Sarah confirmed, watching the monitors with growing excitement and concern, "but it's at least a week early based on our estimates." Michael immediately initiated the birth protocol. All non-essential personnel were cleared from the vicinity of the complex. Monitoring was switched to thermal imaging to reduce potential disturbance from camera lights and the veterinary emergency. Kit was prepared for intervention if absolutely necessary. "With her health history and the premature timing, we need to be ready for complications," Michael reminded the team. "But natural birth without intervention remains our primary goal." As dusk fell over the sanctuary, Willow's labor intensified. The team maintained their vigil from the observation station, speaking in hushed tones as they watched the thermal images, showing Willow's contractions growing stronger and more frequent. At precisely 11:17 p.m., the first cub arrived, a tiny form barely distinguishable on the thermal imaging. Collective breath was held until movement confirmed the cub was alive, and Willow immediately began the cleaning process vital for newborn survival. "One healthy cub," Michael noted in the birth record, his clinical tone belying the emotion all felt witnessing this improbable new life. Over the next 3 hours, 3 more cubs arrived, each following the same pattern of delivery: maternal cleaning and successful first nursing. By 2:30 a.m., 4 cubs nestled against their mother, all showing strong vital signs despite their premature arrival and Willow's compromised health history. The team prepared to end their observation, relieved at the seemingly successful birth, against extraordinary odds. "Wait!" Sarah suddenly interrupted, pointing to the monitor. "She's still in labor. There's at least one more." The atmosphere in the observation room shifted from celebratory to tense as Willow's contractions resumed with increased intensity. Unlike the relatively smooth delivery of the first 4 cubs, this labor appeared significantly more difficult. Willow's movements became increasingly distressed, her body contorting with powerful contractions that seemed to yield no progress. "Something's wrong," Michael said quietly, reaching for his medical kit. "The cub might be malpositioned. If this continues much longer, we'll need to intervene." For 40 minutes, they watched Willow struggle, torn between their commitment to minimal intervention and growing concern for both mother and unborn cub. Just as Michael was preparing to enter the birthing den, Willow gave one final powerful push. The thermal imaging showed the emergence of the fifth cub, significantly smaller than its siblings. But unlike the others, this cub appeared motionless. "No movement," Sarah whispered, the disappointment palpable in her voice. "After everything, to lose one now." Michael shouldered his medical bag. "I'm going in. That cub needs immediate attention if there's any chance." As he approached the den entrance, moving with deliberate slowness to minimize startling Willow, something on the monitor caught Amber's attention. "Wait," she called urgently. "Look at the regular camera feed. Something's different about this one." Michael paused, turning back to the monitor. The night vision camera, offering slightly more detail than the thermal imaging, showed Willow carefully cleaning the fifth cub. As she moved it into better view, the team collectively gasped. Unlike its siblings with their typical bobcat coloration, the fifth cub displayed a striking anomaly: patches of distinctly different fur pattern and an unusual conformation to its facial features. Michael rushed back to the monitors, adjusting settings to enhance the image quality. When the picture clarified, he physically staggered backward, an involuntary cry of shock escaping him. "This is impossible," he breathed, his scientific composure completely abandoned. "Absolutely impossible." What the improved image revealed defied biological explanation. The fifth cub displayed unmistakable characteristics of a species that should never, under any natural circumstances, be able to hybridize. With a bobcat, the implications were so profound that for several moments, the observation room remained in stunned silence, broken only by the soft sounds of Willow attending to her extraordinary litter. The team's immediate challenge transcended scientific curiosity. They faced a living biological anomaly potentially requiring specialized care. After his initial shock, Michael quickly regained his professional focus. "We need to document everything meticulously," he instructed. "But our priority remains the health of Willow and all 5 cubs. This fifth cub appears significantly smaller and potentially compromised." The unprecedented nature of the situation demanded both immediate action and extreme discretion. "No communication about the fifth cub leaves this room until we've conducted a proper verification," Tom emphasized. "The scientific implications are enormous, and premature disclosure could bring unwanted attention to Willow and the litter." After determining that Willow was stable and currently managing all 5 cubs adequately, the team established an enhanced monitoring protocol, continuous observation with detailed behavioral documentation and preparation for potential medical intervention if the anomalous cub showed signs of distress. By dawn, preliminary observations revealed concerning patterns. While the first 4 cubs nursed vigorously and maintained stable body temperature against their mother, the fifth struggled to compete for nursing access and appeared to have difficulty maintaining position in the group. Its smaller size and potentially different metabolic needs put it at a disadvantage, Michael explained during the early morning assessment. "We need to consider supplemental feeding if it continues to struggle, but that means disrupting the family unit." This created precisely the kind of ethical dilemma that tested Pinewood's non-intervention philosophy. Would more harm come from separating the unusual cub for specialized care, or from leaving it to potentially fail in a natural but challenging environment? The team's discussion was passionate but focused. "This cub represents something unprecedented in recorded wildlife biology," Sarah argued. "There's a scientific obligation to ensure its survival." Amber offered a different perspective. "Our primary commitment is to Willow and wildlife welfare, not to scientific discovery. Whatever intervention we choose must prioritize her recovery and successful bonding with her litter." In the end, they reached a compromise. They would allow 12 more hours of natural maternal care while preparing for potential supplemental feeding. If the fifth cub showed further signs of failure to thrive, they would implement a limited intervention strategy, removing the cub only for essential supplemental feeding sessions before returning it to Willow. This approach maintains the critical maternal bond while addressing the cub's potential special needs, Michael concluded, but it requires perfect execution to minimize stress on an already compromised family unit. The following 72 hours established a new standard for dedication at Pinewood. The team organized rotating observation shifts, documenting every nursing attempt, maternal interaction, and developmental milestone for all 5 cubs. Tom reconfigured the sanctuary's staffing to maintain essential operations while allowing the core team to focus on the unprecedented case. Dr. Olivia Martinez, a reproductive specialist from Oregon State University and longtime collaborator with Pinewood, was the only outside expert consulted, arriving discreetly to examine genetic samples from the 5th cub while signing extensive confidentiality agreements. Her preliminary findings only deepened the mystery. The genetic markers suggest interspecies hybridization that should be biologically impossible, she reported to the team. I'll need to run more comprehensive analysis, but we're looking at something that fundamentally challenges our understanding of reproductive barriers between felid species. Meanwhile, the 5th cub, temporarily designated Echo for record-keeping purposes, continued to struggle despite Willow's attentive care. After 36 hours of observation, the team implemented their intervention plan when Echo's weight measurement showed a decline, while the other cubs were gaining steadily. The first supplemental feeding attempt presented its own challenges. Sarah, who had the gentlest touch with neonatal wildlife, carefully removed Echo while Willow was briefly distracted with a food enrichment on the opposite side of the complex. The specialized formula, developed specifically for Echo's unique nutritional needs based on Dr. Martinez's preliminary genetic assessment, was administered via syringe feeding in the adjacent medical station. The process took less than 15 minutes, but returning Echo to the litter created a moment of intense apprehension. Would Willow reject the cub after human handling? Would the disruptions stress her to the point of neglecting the entire litter? The team watched anxiously as Sarah carefully placed Echo back among its siblings. Willow immediately approached, sniffing intensively at the cub, detecting the unfamiliar sense of human handling and formula. For several heart-stopping moments, she simply stared at Echo, her body language unreadable. Then, with deliberate gentleness, she began grooming the cub thoroughly, removing the human scent and re-establishing her maternal claim. "She's accepting the intervention," Michael observed, with poorly concealed relief. "This might actually work." Over the following week, a remarkable partnership developed between Willow and the Pinewood team. The rotation of feed and return, interventions for Echo, established a pattern that Willow seemed to not just tolerate, but anticipate. After the 3rd supplemental feeding, cameras captured extraordinary behavior. Willow actually moved Echo to the edge of the den nearest the entrance, shortly before Sarah's scheduled arrival, as if facilitating the intervention she had somehow recognized as beneficial. "She's cooperating with us," Amber marveled during one team briefing. "I've never seen this level of adaptation in a wild mother." Echo's condition gradually stabilized with the combination of maternal care and supplemental feeding. Though still smaller than its siblings, the hybrid cub began showing improved vitality, stronger nursing attempts, and more coordinated movements. The other cubs, now with eyes beginning to open and showing normal development progression, treated Echo no differently, despite the visible distinctions in appearance that became more pronounced as their fur dried and fluffed. By the 10th day, the supplemental feeding protocol was reduced to twice daily, as Echo demonstrated increased success at competing for nursing access. The team began cautiously sharing their optimism about the cub's chances for survival, though the long-term implications of its hybrid status remained entirely unknown territory. Even Dr. Martinez's expanded genetic analysis provided more questions than answers. "The genetic combination we're seeing shouldn't be viable," she explained. During a secured video conference, chromosome numbers between these species are incompatible. We're looking at something that rewrites our understanding of reproductive barriers. As Echo passed the critical 2-week survival threshold, the team confronted their next challenge: developing a longer-term management plan for a creature with no existing care precedents. Would Echo develop more like a bobcat, following Willow's behavioral cues? Or would the genetic influence of the other species manifest in unexpected developmental patterns requiring specialized management? The territory was completely uncharted, requiring the team to rely on fundamental principles of wildlife rehabilitation while remaining flexible enough to adapt to unforeseen circumstances. "We're writing the manual as we go," Michael acknowledged during one late-night monitoring shift. "But that's been true of wildlife medicine throughout its history. We observe, we adapt, we learn." The relative stability established during those first weeks was shattered on day 17, when Echo's health suddenly deteriorated without obvious cause. The cub became lethargic, refusing both maternal nursing and supplemental formula. Most alarmingly, Echo developed rapid, shallow breathing and elevated temperature, classic signs of systemic infection. "This could be developmental," Michael hypothesized during the emergency assessment. "The hybrid immune system may be encountering challenges that wouldn't affect a standard bobcat cub." The situation demanded more intensive intervention than their feed and return protocol could address. After careful deliberation, the team decided to temporarily remove Echo for comprehensive medical treatment, creating a dedicated intensive care unit adjacent to Willow's den complex that would allow for visual and scent connection between mother and cub, despite the physical separation. The specialized ICU incorporated heating elements calibrated to mimic maternal body temperature. Heartbeat simulators and bedding materials cycled between Echo's space and the main den to maintain scent familiarity. Michael and Dr. Martinez collaborated on a treatment protocol that accounted for Echo's unique physiology, combining broad-spectrum antibiotics with immune support supplements specifically calculated for the cub's hybrid metabolism. The separation clearly distressed Willow, who spent hours positioned against the partition closest to Echo's ICU, vocalizing in low, plaintive tones that the team had never before recorded from a mother bobcat. "She's calling to Echo," Sarah observed. "The bond transcends the physical anomalies." Even the sibling cubs seemed affected by the separation, displaying decreased activity and clustering near the same partition where Willow maintained her vigil. The first 48 hours of treatment yielded minimal improvement. Echo's condition stabilized but showed no significant recovery, creating mounting concern that the hybrid genetics might present insurmountable developmental challenges. "We're operating on the edge of veterinary science," Michael confessed to Tom during a rare break. "Nothing in the literature prepares you for treating a creature that theoretically shouldn't exist." Just as the team began discussing painful contingency plans, Echo showed the first signs of improvement: stronger interest in formula, decreased respiratory rate, and brief periods of alert behavior. By the 4th day of treatment, the improvement was substantial enough to consider reintroduction to Willow and the litter, a process that carried its own risks after such a significant separation. Would Willow still accept Echo after days of absence and intensive human handling? The answer came in a moment none of the team would ever forget. As Sarah carefully placed Echo back in the den, Willow immediately abandoned her usual caution. around humans, rushing forward with single-minded focus on her returned cub. The reunion that followed, Willow thoroughly examining Echo, gently grooming the cub from head to tail, then curling protectively around all 5 cubs, represented everything the Pinewood philosophy embodied: trust in the resilience of wildlife. When given proper support and respect for the profound bonds that exist beyond human understanding. The crisis and reunion marked a turning point in Echo's development. Though still distinctive in appearance and smaller than its siblings, Echo began displaying remarkable compensatory adaptations. While the other cubs relied primarily on size and strength during competitive play and nursing access, Echo developed strategy, waiting until siblings were satiated before nursing, utilizing unique approach angles to access Willow, and demonstrating problem-solving skills that seemed advanced for its developmental stage. It's as if facing greater challenges has accelerated certain cognitive developments, Sarah noted in her observational records. Echo is compensating for physical limitations with behavioral adaptations. As the cubs reached 1 month of age, a critical developmental milestone for bobcats, all 5 began demonstrating the expected progression toward greater independence, exploring further from Willow, engaging in more complex play behaviors that mimicked hunting skills, and beginning to show interest in the solid food provided alongside Willow's meals. Echo's development continued to follow a parallel but distinct trajectory. While the standard bobcat cubs focused on climbing and pouncing play, Echo showed greater interest in problem-solving enrichment, manipulating puzzle feeders, investigating novel objects with methodical curiosity, and demonstrating remarkable dexterity. Most fascinating to the team was the social dynamic that emerged within the litter. Rather than Echo being marginalized due to physical differences, the hybrid cub developed what appeared to be specialized roles in group activities. During play sessions involving all 5 cubs, Echo often initiated complex sequences that incorporated the strengths of each sibling. It's like watching the emergence of specialized pack behavior in what should be relatively solitary animals, Sarah observed with growing excitement. Echo isn't just surviving as an anomaly, it's potentially influencing the entire family unit toward novel social structures. This observation raised profound questions about the litter's future. Standard rehabilitation protocol for bobcats at Pinewood involved gradual transition to a pre-release enclosure at approximately 3 months, followed by soft release back to suitable habitat when the young reached dispersal age. But this litter, with its unprecedented hybrid member and potentially altered social dynamics, presented unique considerations. Would separating Echo from its siblings be necessary given its genetic differences? Could the hybrid safely and ethically be released to the wild, or would permanent sanctuary care be required? Each option carried significant implications for both animal welfare and the scientific understanding that could be gained from this extraordinary case. We have time before these decisions become urgent, Michael reminded the team during their planning discussions. For now, we continue careful documentation while supporting their natural development. The cubs themselves may show us the right path forward. By the 2-month mark, the litter's progress had exceeded all expectations. All 5 cubs, including Echo, had successfully transitioned to solid food while still supplementing with occasional nursing. Their weight curves showed healthy development, with Echo still smaller but maintaining a consistent growth pattern proportional to its hybrid physiology. The team had gradually expanded the family's territory by opening additional connected chambers in the complex, providing more diverse terrain for the cubs to develop climbing, balancing, and hunting skills. Remote cameras captured increasingly sophisticated play behaviors that mimicked essential survival skills: stalking, pouncing, ambush techniques, and prey handling. Throughout this development, Echo's distinctive attributes became more pronounced, while simultaneously demonstrating remarkable adaptation to bobcat behavioral patterns. The hybrid cub's fur pattern, initially subtle in its difference, now showed unmistakable characteristics of its genetic heritage, with distinctive markings that would make anonymous release to the wild problematic. More striking were the behavioral differences that emerged alongside strong bobcat imprinting. Echo displayed sensory sensitivities and response patterns that diverged from standard bobcat development, particularly in acoustic alertness and scent tracking, ability that seemed enhanced compared to its siblings. We're essentially observing the real-time evolution of adaptive behaviors in a hybrid context, Dr. Martinez noted during her monthly assessment visit. Echo is integrating behavioral inheritance from both genetic lineages, creating a unique behavioral profile that optimizes survival potential. This observation led to extensive discussion about Echo's future and the ethical considerations surrounding the entire litter. The standard rehabilitation goal, releasing animals back to appropriate wild habitat, now presented unprecedented complexities. Releasing a visible hybrid into wild populations raised concerns about genetics, territorial acceptance by established bobcats, and potential attention from humans if sighted. Equally concerning was the possibility that separating Echo from the litter could disrupt the unique social dynamic that had developed. They're functioning almost as a specialized unit now, Sarah argued during one particularly intense planning session. Echo's differences have catalyzed adaptive behaviors in the entire family group that might actually enhance their collective survival potential. This perspective suggested a revolutionary possibility. Might the entire family unit, including Echo, represent an adaptive variation that could actually thrive if released together in carefully selected habitat? The question challenged fundamental assumptions about wildlife rehabilitation and species boundaries, forcing the team to balance scientific opportunity, animal welfare, and conservation ethics in uncharted territory. The decision-making process coincided with growing external interest in Pinewood's unusually secretive bobcat rehabilitation case. Despite the team's careful information management, the extended timelines and specialized equipment requests had generated questions from the sanctuary's regular donors and partner organizations. Tom had deftly fielded inquiries with general updates about a medically complex bobcat family requiring specialized care, but the pressure for more detailed information and potential visitor access was mounting. After careful consideration, the team decided to take a calculated risk. They would invite Dr. Eleanor Wright, the Regional Wildlife Authority from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, for a confidential assessment. As a respected conservation scientist with regulatory oversight and a long-standing relationship with Pinewood, Dr. Wright could provide both valuable perspective and potential regulatory guidance for the unprecedented situation. Her visit was arranged with extraordinary security measures, scheduled during off hours, with non-essential staff given alternative assignments, and under strict confidentiality agreements. When Dr. Wright first observed the family group through the specialized viewing area, her reaction mirrored the team's initial shock. "In 30 years of wildlife work, I've never seen anything like this," she admitted, studying Echo's distinctive features as the cub engaged in coordinated play with two siblings. The implications for our understanding of reproductive isolation between felid species are profound. More valuable than her scientific assessment was her practical guidance on the regulatory considerations. This presents a genuine gray area in wildlife management policy, she explained during the subsequent briefing. While hybrids of certain species combinations fall under specific regulations, this particular genetic combination has never been documented or considered in existing frameworks. After thorough discussion, Dr. Wright proposed a solution that balanced scientific, ethical, and regulatory considerations. A controlled soft release of the entire family unit in a remote portion of protected sanctuary property with continued, non-invasive monitoring to document their adaptation and development. This approach would allow the cats as much natural freedom as possible while enabling ongoing research and intervention capability if necessary. This represents an unprecedented opportunity to observe how novel genetic combinations might adapt. In semi-wild conditions, she noted, the knowledge gained could have significant conservation implications, particularly as climate change forces species into new ranges and potential contact zones. With Dr. Wright's provisional approval and commitment to navigate the complex regulatory considerations, the team began preparations for the most ambitious phase of this extraordinary case, creating a transition pathway to managed freedom for a family that challenged fundamental biological understanding. The preparation for this innovative soft release program demanded rethinking standard rehabilitation protocols. The team designed a graduated transition plan beginning with relocation to a specially constructed 2-acre pre-release enclosure. In the sanctuary's most remote sector, this expansive space incorporated natural features including rock formations, varied vegetation zones, running water, and even the capacity for introducing live prey under controlled conditions. Most innovative was the specialized monitoring system designed by Sarah in collaboration with wildlife technology specialists. A network of unobtrusive sensors and cameras that would provide comprehensive data on movement patterns, hunting success, social interactions, and health indicators without requiring direct observation or intervention. The family's transition to this environment would be the ultimate test of whether Echo's hybrid status had created sustainable adaptations or vulnerabilities that would become apparent in more natural conditions. When the day arrived for transfer to the pre-release enclosure, the team approached the process with mixed emotions. Professional excitement about the groundbreaking nature of the project, tempered by genuine attachment to the extraordinary family they had supported through so many challenges. Willow and her cubs, now nearly 3 months old, were sedated using individually calculated protocols that accounted for Echo's unique physiology. They were transported to the new location in specialized carriers designed to minimize stress and maintain the family's scent profile during the journey. Upon arrival, they were carefully positioned together in the central denning area of the new enclosure, allowing them to recover from sedation as a unit and begin exploration of their expanded territory when ready. The team retreated to the remote monitoring station, maintaining complete silence as they awaited the family's first movements in their new environment. Willow recovered first, her experienced eyes methodically scanning the unfamiliar surroundings, while maintaining protective positioning over her still drowsy cubs. As the young bobcats gradually regained consciousness, a remarkable behavioral sequence unfolded that further challenged conventional understanding of felid family dynamics. Rather than immediately exploring independently the expected behavior, for bobcat cubs of this age, the 5 formed a coordinated unit with Willow at the lead, systematically investigating their new territory in a pattern that optimized safety and awareness. Most striking was Echo's position, not marginalized due to smaller size or hybrid status, but integrated into what appeared to be a specialized role, often positioning at specific angles to siblings during exploration points, creating what Sarah described as a sensory network that maximized the group's collective awareness. "They're moving almost like a pack," Michael observed with quiet amazement. Coordinated family group behavior at this level simply isn't documented in standard bobcat development. This observation reinforced the team's growing conviction that Echo's hybrid influence had catalyzed novel social adaptations that could potentially enhance the entire family's survival prospects, an evolutionary experiment unfolding through the most unlikely circumstances. Over the following weeks, the monitoring data revealed fascinating patterns that both confirmed and challenged the team's hypotheses. The family maintained its unusually cohesive social structure, hunting cooperatively and sharing access to resources in ways rarely observed in bobcat family groups. Particularly revealing were the night vision recordings of their first successful large prey capture, a process in which all 5 young bobcats participated in coordinated roles, with Echo demonstrating distinctive flanking movements that effectively herded the prey toward the stronger siblings. Most encouraging for the eventual full release plans was their complete avoidance of the human access points to the enclosure, displaying appropriate wariness despite their extensive exposure to humans during the rehabilitation process. They're thriving as a unit, Sarah reported during the 6-week assessment. Their hunting success exceeds what we typically expect for this developmental stage, and their territory utilization shows sophisticated understanding of resource distribution. Echo's development continued its parallel but distinctive trajectory. While integrating successfully with siblings in group activities, the hybrid also displayed independent behaviors that reflected its unique genetic heritage. Different vocalizations during certain contexts, specialized scent marking patterns, and problem-solving approaches that sometimes diverged from typical bobcat methodology. Rather than these differences creating conflict, they appeared to expand the family unit's collective behavioral repertoire, creating what Dr. Martinez described as a hybrid vigor effect at the family system level. The pre-release phase culminated in a comprehensive health assessment at the 5-month mark, a critical milestone requiring brief recapture of all family members for physical examination, updated measurements, and final preparation for full release. The process revealed remarkable physical development in all 5 young bobcats. The 4 standard siblings displayed typical measurements and health markers for their age, while Echo showed a distinctive but equally robust development pattern, with certain physiological parameters reflecting its hybrid genetics. Most significantly, all 5 demonstrated excellent musculoskeletal development and cardiovascular fitness, indicative of successful adaptation to the more demanding physical environment. With all health indicators confirming readiness, the team prepared for the final step, removing the perimeter barriers of the pre-release enclosure to allow complete freedom of movement while maintaining the non-invasive monitoring network. This transition would represent the true test of whether a biological anomaly that began in the most unnatural circumstances, a trafficked bobcat producing an impossible hybrid cub, could successfully integrate into the natural world. The soft release occurred on a clear autumn morning, exactly 7 months after Willow first arrived at Pinewood. In a carefully orchestrated operation, sections of the enclosure boundary were removed to create strategic exit points. While the family rested in their preferred denning area, remote cameras captured the moment Willow first noticed the changed perimeter during her evening territory patrol. Her alert posture and intensified sensory assessment clearly visible as she detected the new openings. Rather than immediately investigating, she returned to the den and engaged in extended interaction with the young bobcats in what appeared to be a communication session. When the family finally approached the first opening shortly after dawn, the following day, they moved as the coordinated unit that had become their signature pattern. Willow led, with the 5 younger bobcats arrayed behind her in a formation that optimized visual coverage. Most striking was their deliberate pace, not rushing into freedom, but methodically assessing the new territories available to them. Over the first month of complete freedom, the monitoring network tracked the family's gradual expansion of their range. They established a core territory, approximately 3 times the size of their pre-release enclosure, centered around a rock formation with excellent denning options and abundant prey opportunities. Their movement data showed sophisticated territory utilization, regular patrol patterns, established hunting grounds, and consistent avoidance of the infrequently used service road that represented the nearest human activity. Most encouraging was their continued social cohesion. While standard bobcat families typically begin dispersing by this age, this unit maintained its coordinated structure with increasingly specialized roles. Particularly fascinating was Echo's evident contribution to the group's success. The hybrid often initiated exploration of new territory segments, displayed advanced sensory awareness that alerted the group to both opportunities and potential threats, and frequently introduced innovative hunting techniques that increased their collective success rate. "We're witnessing the real-time evolution of novel social structures," Sarah observed during one analysis session. Echo's hybrid genetics have created adaptive behaviors that are influencing the entire family unit. The most dramatic evidence of Echo's influence came 3 months after release, when the monitoring system captured an extraordinary encounter with a young male mountain lion that had recently established territory overlapping with the bobcat family's range. Such encounters typically end badly for bobcats, who are significantly outmatched by the larger predator. The footage showed the mountain lion approaching the area where 3 of the young bobcats, including Echo, were feeding on a recent kill. Standard bobcat response would be immediate retreat or at best tree climbing to avoid the threat. Instead, the cameras captured a coordinated defensive response. Echo immediately produced a distinctive vocalization unlike standard bobcat calls, triggering Willow and the 2 absent siblings to converge rapidly on the location from different directions. The family formed a defensive formation with synchronized movements and unified vocalizations that visibly confused the mountain lion. After a tense standoff, the larger predator retreated from the area, leaving the bobcat family in possession of both territory and kill. This behavior has no precedent in documented bobcat ecology, Dr. Wright noted when reviewing the footage. It represents an entirely novel strategic response that effectively counters one of their primary natural threats. This successful adaptation to wild conditions resolved many of the team's concerns about Echo's viability outside captivity. Rather than being a vulnerability, the hybrid influence appeared to convey significant advantages when integrated within a supportive family structure. The monitoring data increasingly supported a revolutionary hypothesis that under specific circumstances, hybridization might actually accelerate adaptive evolution by introducing behavioral and physiological variations that a single species might not develop in isolation. While emphasizing that the circumstances of Echo's creation through illegal wildlife trafficking and forced breeding remained ethically unacceptable, the scientific implications for understanding adaptation in rapidly changing environments had profound conservation implications. As the first anniversary of Willow's rescue approached, the Pinewood team prepared a comprehensive report documenting this unprecedented case. With Dr. Wright's guidance, they developed appropriate protocols for sharing their findings with the scientific community while protecting the family's precise location and status. The paper, authored jointly by the core team with Dr. Martinez's genetic analysis as the centerpiece, would introduce Echo's case to the world as a window into evolutionary processes and the unexpected resilience of nature even in the most compromised circumstances. The night before submitting the manuscript, the team gathered to review the latest monitoring footage, a tradition that had developed over months of investment in this extraordinary story. The screens showed the family moving through moonlit forest, now confident occupants of their wild home. Willow led with the assurance of an experienced mother, while the 5 young bobcats, now approaching adult size, moved with the coordinated precision that had become their hallmark. Echo, still distinctive in appearance, but fully integrated. In function, paused momentarily in a shaft of moonlight, golden eyes reflecting the camera's infrared illumination. In that moment, watching this biological impossibility thrive against all scientific expectations, the team shared a profound recognition that nature's capacity for adaptation and survival extended far beyond human understanding, and that even in the most unnatural beginning, something authentic and wild could emerge. The scientific paper titled Unprecedented Viable Hybridization in Felidae, Behavioral Adaptation and Cooperative Social Structure in a Mixed Genetics Bobcat Family Unit was published in the Journal of Mammalian Evolution 6 weeks later. The response was immediate and intense. Conservation biologists, genetic researchers, and wildlife management professionals around the world requested additional data, challenged methodologies, and debated the implications. Several institutions expressed interest in conducting comparative studies with other felid species. Media coverage, while carefully managed to protect the family's location, brought unprecedented attention to Pinewood Wildlife Sanctuary and its innovative approaches to rehabilitation. Through it all, the team maintained their primary focus, continuing to monitor Echo and the family unit as they fully integrated into their wild existence. The monitoring data from the second year revealed fascinating developments in the family's structure and behavior. While standard bobcat families typically disperse completely by this stage, with young bobcats establishing independent territories far from their birth location, this unit maintained a modified communal structure. The siblings had begun establishing individual core areas within an expanded collective territory, creating what Sarah described as a shared space model with distributed responsibility. Most notably, Echo remained closely bonded with Willow, the two frequently hunting together and sharing denning areas despite the hybrid's now mature status. When the first breeding season following release arrived, the monitoring systems captured another unprecedented behavior. 2 of the female siblings, now of reproductive age, remained in proximity to Willow rather than dispersing to seek mates. A visiting male bobcat who entered their territory engaged in courtship behaviors with all 3 females, ultimately breeding with Willow and 1 daughter. Most surprisingly, Echo, whose reproductive capacity had been an open question given its hybrid status, showed no breeding interest despite reaching physical maturity, instead maintaining its specialized role within the family structure. The resulting litters, born approximately 2 months later, provided the ultimate test of Echo's genetic influence on the larger bobcat population. Careful analysis of remote footage showing the 6 new cubs, 3 from Willow and 3 from her daughter, revealed standard bobcat characteristics with no visible hybrid traits. Genetic sampling from shed fur collected at denning sites confirmed Dr. Martinez's analysis. Echo's unusual genetic combination appeared to create a reproductive barrier, preventing the hybrid from breeding while allowing it to contribute to family success through non-reproductive roles. This natural limitation addressed one of the most significant conservation concerns about hybrid individuals: the potential for genetically disruptive traits to spread through wider populations. Echo's case suggested a biological failsafe that, even when hybridization occurs, reproductive isolation mechanisms may maintain species boundaries while still allowing the hybrid individual to contribute to its immediate family group's success. 3 years after Willow's dramatic rescue and Echo's shocking birth, Pinewood Wildlife Sanctuary had evolved into a leading center for conservation genomics and adaptive behavior research. The bobcat family's case had transformed scientific understanding of hybridization in wild felids, challenging dogmatic views about species boundaries while reinforcing the importance of ethical wildlife management. For Dr. Michael Reynolds, whose career had been dedicated to wildlife medicine, the experience provided a profound capstone, a reminder that nature's complexity continues to transcend human understanding even after decades of scientific study. Sarah Jenkins leveraged the groundbreaking research into a collaborative program with 3 major universities, developing new protocols for monitoring rare genetic events in wild populations without disruptive intervention. Tom Wilson expanded Pinewood's educational outreach, using the highly redacted version of Echo's story to illustrate nature's resilience and the critical importance of combating wildlife trafficking. Amber Carter developed specialized curriculum materials that translated the complex scientific concepts into accessible lessons for students at various educational levels. The full story of Echo's genetic origins remained closely guarded, shared only among those directly involved in the case and properly authorized scientists contributing to the research. The hybrid bobcat's distinctive appearance would make it immediately recognizable to informed observers, creating risk of wildlife photography tourism, or worse, attempts to locate such a unique animal for illegal collection. Instead, the team focused on the broader scientific implications while protecting the family's right to live without human interference beyond their unobtrusive monitoring systems. The precision tracking data continued for 5 years, long enough to document the complete integration of Echo and the original family unit into the regional bobcat population, with the distinctive social structures gradually evolving toward more typical territorial patterns as new generations established their own ranges. When the time came to conclude the formal monitoring program, the decision carried both scientific satisfaction and emotional weight for the team that had witnessed such an extraordinary journey from its desperate beginning to its successful conclusion. On the final day of active monitoring, Dr. Reynolds, Sarah, Tom, and Amber hiked to the remote observation blind overlooking the valley that had become the expanded family's core territory. Though the likelihood of a visual sighting was minimal, they felt compelled to be physically present for this transition, to acknowledge the end of their direct involvement in a story that had transformed both scientific understanding and their personal connection to wildlife work. As dusk settled over the landscape, painting the rocky outcroppings in amber light reminiscent of a bobcat's eyes, Sarah's attention was drawn to movement at the forest edge. Through binoculars, she distinguished a mature bobcat emerging cautiously into the small clearing, distinctive in its confident movements and unusual fur pattern visible even at distance. Echo had made an appearance, whether by coincidence or some inexplicable awareness of this transition moment. For several minutes, the hybrid bobcat surveyed the valley from its elevated position, a wild creature fully embodying its place in the natural world despite origins that defied biological expectation. Then, with characteristic deliberate movement, Echo melted back into the forest, returning to a life beyond human observation, carrying impossible genetics and remarkable adaptations that would continue to influence its family line through behavioral inheritance, if not reproductive legacy. As the team hiked back to the sanctuary in the gathering darkness, their conversation revolved around the broader meaning of Echo's journey. How a single, unexpected life had catalyzed scientific breakthroughs, institutional evolution, and profound personal growth for everyone involved. In wildlife rehabilitation, we measure success by how completely an animal returns to its wild nature. Michael reflected as the lights of the sanctuary came into view. By that measure, this case represents our greatest achievement, though we can take credit for very little of it. Nature found its own path, as it always does when given the space to adapt. The formal monitoring program concluded with comprehensive data analysis and a final scientific publication, but Pinewood maintained passive trail cameras in strategic locations throughout the territory. These would continue collecting intermittent glimpses of Echo and the extended family for years to come, not as research subjects, but as free wild beings whose extraordinary story had briefly intersected with human understanding before returning fully to the ancient rhythms of natural existence. The enduring legacy of Echo's case manifested in multiple dimensions over the following decade. Scientifically, it triggered a re-evaluation of taxonomic classifications within Felidae, with new research focusing on the genetic compatibility and historical hybridization evident in the evolutionary record. Several conservation programs incorporated the lessons from Echo's family structure into rehabilitation protocols for social predators, recognizing the potential value of maintaining family bonds rather than enforcing artificial independence based on outdated understanding of species behavior. Educationally, the carefully anonymized case study became a cornerstone example in wildlife biology curricula, illustrating both the extraordinary adaptive potential within mammalian genetics and the ethical complexities of human intervention in natural systems. Most significantly for Pinewood, the experience transformed their approach to wildlife rehabilitation, emphasizing the importance of recognizing and supporting novel adaptation rather than imposing predetermined expectations about normal behavior or development. For the core team, who had witnessed Echo's birth and growth, the experience remained a touchstone, a reminder of why they had dedicated their lives to wildlife conservation and the profound rewards of approaching that work with humility and openness to nature's capacity for surprising solutions. Dr. Reynolds eventually published a memoir titled Beyond Categories, A Lifetime of Learning from Wildlife, with a carefully anonymized version of Echo's story serving as the central metaphor for his evolving understanding of artificial boundaries in biological classification. Sarah Jenkins developed a groundbreaking methodology for non-invasive monitoring of wildlife social structures, technology now implemented in conservation programs on 4 continents. Tom Wilson expanded Pinewood's model to include 3 additional satellite facilities specializing in different habitat types, creating a network of rehabilitation centers sharing knowledge and resources. Amber Carter's educational programs reached thousands of students annually, inspiring a new generation of conservation-minded citizens who understood the complexity and resilience of natural systems. The final confirmed sighting of Echo came 7 years after the formal monitoring program concluded, captured on a trail camera positioned near a rocky outcropping in the heart of what had been the family's original territory. The image showed a mature bobcat with the distinctive hybrid features, accompanied by an elderly female, presumed to be Willow, now well into her senior years. The pair moved with the coordinated awareness that had characterized their relationship from the beginning, wild creatures fulfilling their natural lifespan in habitats increasingly threatened by human encroachment and climate disruption. When Pinewood staff discussed the rare captured image during their monthly research review, the conversation focused not on the scientific implications that had once seemed so paramount, but on the simple, enduring connection between 2 beings who had found adaptive success in their differences rather than despite them. In a world increasingly fragmented by human activity, where wildlife faced unprecedented challenges to survival, Echo's story represented a reminder of nature's profound capacity for resilience when given even the smallest opportunity to express its evolutionary wisdom. Dr. Eleanor Wright, reflecting on the case during her keynote address at the International Conservation Biology Symposium years later, perhaps best captured its enduring significance. The story of Echo, this biologically impossible creature born into the most compromised circumstances, reminds us that nature's solutions often emerge from unexpected places. In our rush to categorize, manage, and control natural systems, we risk overlooking the novel adaptations emerging at the edges of our understanding. Perhaps conservation's future lies not in preserving rigid categories of species and behaviors, but in protecting the ecological conditions that allow adaptation itself to flourish. As human development continued claiming wild spaces and climate, change forced species into new ranges and relationships. The lessons from Echo's remarkable journey offered a template for conservation approaches focused on resilience and adaptability rather than static preservation, an evolutionary perspective that recognized change as the only constant in natural systems and sought to protect the conditions that allowed successful adaptation rather than specific genetic lineages or behavioral patterns. 20 years after Willow's rescue and Echo's birth, Pinewood Wildlife Sanctuary hosted a private memorial gathering following Dr. Michael Reynolds' passing after a brief illness. The intimate ceremony, attended by colleagues who had shared in the sanctuary's most significant cases, took place at sunset in the original observation room where Echo's extraordinary lineage had first been discovered. As former team members shared memories of Michael's contributions to wildlife medicine, Sarah Jenkins, now the sanctuary's senior research director, directed attention to the wall display showing 2 decades of conservation milestones. At the center was a single image, the thermal camera capture of the moment Michael first recognized Echo's hybrid nature, his scientific composure completely abandoned in an instant of pure astonishment. Michael often said that moment changed everything for him, Sarah told the gathered colleagues. Not just his understanding of felid genetics, but his entire approach to wildlife medicine. He learned to expect the impossible and to trust nature's capacity for finding solutions beyond our imagination. As twilight settled over the sanctuary and the ceremony concluded, attendees moved outside to the memorial garden planted with native species that supported the region's wildlife. A motion sensor triggered the soft lighting along the footpath, briefly illuminating a mature bobcat observing the gathering from the forest edge. Distinctive in its unusual coat pattern and confident posture, despite its proximity to humans. Whether the appearance was coincidence or something more meaningful remained one of nature's mysteries, but those who had been part of Echo's story chose to interpret it as they wished. A wild creature acknowledging a human who had respected its journey while protecting its freedom. Before anyone could react, the bobcat melted back into the darkness, returning to a world where scientific classification mattered far less than the practical wisdom of adaptation and survival. The monitoring systems throughout Pinewood's expanded protected territories continued, occasionally capturing images of bobcats, showing subtle hybrid characteristics in subsequent generations, never as pronounced as Echo's distinctive features, but suggesting some genetic influence had persisted despite the presumed reproductive barriers. These hints of Echo's lasting legacy informed continuing research into felid evolution and adaptation mechanisms, contributing to a growing scientific understanding that species boundaries were more fluid than previously recognized, with genetic exchange occurring at low levels throughout evolutionary history. As climate change accelerated, forcing previously separated species into shared territories, The lessons from Echo's case provided valuable insights into potential adaptation mechanisms that might emerge in response to rapidly shifting ecological conditions. While human activity had created the unnatural circumstances of Echo's origin through wildlife trafficking and forced breeding, the subsequent natural adaptation offered a window into evolutionary processes that might help certain species survive the Anthropocene's unprecedented challenges. Pinewood's approach to wildlife rehabilitation evolved accordingly, maintaining its commitment to returning animals to their wild nature, while recognizing that wild itself was not a static concept, but a dynamic relationship between genetics, behavior, and environment that continued evolving in response to changing conditions. The final chapter of Echo's story was written not in scientific journals or conservation textbooks, but in the continuing presence of bobcats in territories facing increasing human encroachment. Trail cameras occasionally captured images of individuals, displaying subtle variations in coat patterns and social behaviors reminiscent of the original hybrid's influence. Adaptations that appeared to convey advantages in navigating fragmented habitats and avoiding human conflicts. Wildlife biologists across the region reported increasing instances of bobcat family groups maintaining extended social bonds beyond typical dispersal age, particularly in areas with complex predator-prey dynamics or limited territory availability. While direct genetic connection to Echo could rarely be confirmed, the behavioral patterns suggested a form of cultural inheritance. Successful adaptations pass through observation and learning rather than genetics alone. This possibility that Echo's most significant legacy might be behavioral rather than genetic opened new research directions in conservation biology, suggesting that protecting individual adaptive innovations might be as important for species resilience as maintaining genetic diversity at population levels. When Pinewood Wildlife Sanctuary celebrated its 30th anniversary with a small gathering of staff, researchers, and supporters, the event included the dedication of a new research center focused on adaptive wildlife behavior and non-invasive monitoring technologies. The center's name, the Reynolds Adaptation Research Facility, honored Michael's contributions while emphasizing the forward-looking approach he had championed in his later career. During her dedication speech, Sarah Jenkins, now internationally recognized for her work on predator adaptation in fragmented habitats, reflected on the journey that had transformed both the sanctuary and the field of wildlife rehabilitation. 30 years ago, we operated from a place of certainty about what each species needed and how rehabilitation should proceed, she told the gathered colleagues and supporters. Today, we approach our work with more questions than answers, recognizing that the animals themselves often show us solutions we couldn't have imagined. Our greatest contribution may be creating the protected spaces where nature can continue its remarkable evolutionary experiments without human interference. As if to emphasize her point, the event concluded with the release of recent monitoring footage showing a healthy bobcat population throughout the expanded sanctuary territories. Descendants of numerous rehabilitation cases, including perhaps some carrying the legacy of Echo's remarkable adaptation in their behaviors, if not their genes. As human development continued fragmenting natural habitats and climate change forced species into new ranges and relationships, the greatest legacy of Echo's extraordinary case became methodological rather than biological, a fundamental shift in how conservation scientists approached novel adaptations, emerging at the boundaries between established categories. Rather than focusing exclusively on preserving pure genetic lineages or enforcing rigid species separations, leading programs increasingly recognized the adaptive value that sometimes emerged from hybridization events and novel behaviors. This Evolutionary perspective acknowledged that nature has always found pathways toward resilience through genetic exchange, behavioral innovation, and unexpected cooperation between organisms. A messy, continuous process of adaptation rather than a static catalogue of distinct species. The Eco Protocol, as it became known in wildlife management circles, emphasized creating protected spaces where these natural experiments could unfold with minimal human interference, recognizing that today's unusual adaptation might become tomorrow's survival advantage in rapidly changing environments. As Sarah Jenkins often reminded young researchers joining Pinewood's programs, our job isn't to define what's natural or to enforce our understanding of species boundaries. It's to protect the conditions that allow nature to continue its 4 billion-year experiment in adaptation and resilience. The most extraordinary solutions often emerge from the exceptions rather than the rules. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.